Hey y'all, and welcome back to Joey's Booked. Today we are going to be covering all of the books by Stephen King that I've read in the last few months. Peter King, how to cut down that as much as you need, idiot. Yeah, I ruined your hiding spot. You're welcome. Almost said the wrong book name. Since I've been without a consistent camera for a few months and I've had a kind of a lack of content, I haven't been able to fully continue on my publication order Stephen King reads. And honestly, as I've been going, it's felt almost problematic and just not as useful, only kind of talking about a book at a time sometimes. So today I thought I'd test out kind of talking about some more of the Stephen King books in publication order that I have read, but kind of in a group. So this is about 4 months of Stephen King books at this point. Going into 2025, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet. I'm thinking about maybe going ahead and maybe reading a few more a month, or just kind of reading them more as I feel like instead of just doing the once a month kind of thing. We'll kind of see how it goes. With all of that said, let's go ahead and talk about the 4 books that I've read since I've at least talked to you guys last. Now, the first 2 on this list, I technically think I even filmed a video for, kind of doing a double feature, and then never got around to getting it edited and stuff because things got really busy at work and I just wasn't able to both read and get into all of that as much. And the first of those is going to be The Eyes of a Dragon. It's following a prince, and it's almost kind of like King Arthur in kind of times. It's not that, but it's kind of like, that's kind of the initial setup. It's kind of following him and how, like, the king is now gone and he's been imprisoned for murder. But there's this guy named Flag who is, like, working stuff behind. And it was a very, very basic fantasy. It was cool kind of seeing Stephen King start to talk fantasy and jump into that genre more. But this one didn't really work for me. I think I gave it a 2.5 stars at the time. Thinking back, it's probably closer to a regular 2. I don't know. I don't have fond memories of this one. I don't even remember it that well, being 4 months out of everything else of his I've read. It was just okay. Nothing I really thought to write home about. And then the other half of what was going to be that double feature video is another fantasy by Stephen King. That would be The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. This is the first co-authored Stephen King book I think I've read. This edition of it clocked in at over 700 pages, almost 750 pages. In this, we are following one of the many Jacks I now have seen in the Stephen King universe. This is Jack Sawyer, and he is 12 years old, and he is like from the everyday world, but then is somehow sent on this quest to recover this talisman to save his dying mother. And on the way, he meets characters, and he is kind of doing like this cross-country, cross-world kind of road trip to where he is almost going back and forth between our world and this other world. And in these worlds, there are sometimes people who look similar to people in our world they call twinners. So there might be 2 different characters with the same face kind of thing. It was a fun story. It was long. It was sectioned off. I think some sections were better than others, and I didn't like that it's like they would introduce like a companion kind of character for a bit, and then they'd do away with that and then introduce another companion. Like, it wasn't like this cast all at once. And that's what I didn't like as much about this. This is the only book now that we've reached the end of the year I can say that I have given a quarter, like a point, some form of a quarter review on, because I gave this a 3.75. And I never really do that. This is the first year I've even started doing like half-star reviews. But this one, it just, I don't know. I looked back at everything I had read at the time. So this one would have been October. And at that point, everything I had given 3 stars, I enjoyed this more than. Everything I'd given 3.5 stars, I enjoyed it more than. But everything I gave like 4 stars, it just didn't live up to. And I was really conflicted, and finally I just settled in the middle. I had a good time. I think it had a lot of potential. I just think it could have used some better execution on my end. And honestly, that's most of what I remember about it at this point in time. For such a lengthy book, it's just not the most memorable. As we got into November, I finally hit my next short story collection, Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. And I love this old cover. This had pretty big collection of stories. And some of the more well-known ones include The Mist, which I was excited to finally read and was a lot different than I expected it to end up going. But I enjoyed it. Names that I at least recognized. I'd heard of Word Processor of the Gods before, even though it was kind of a weird one. It was good though. And I had heard of Survivor Type, which is like Stephen King's supposed to be like one of his like big body horror stories, which wasn't bad. Overall, I think I gave this 3.5 stars. I did enjoy Survivor Type a good bit. I really enjoyed the one called, I think Beach World was one I enjoyed quite a bit. I remember that one stood out a lot. It didn't at the time, but Miss Todd's Shortcut was a good one. And The Jaunt. The Jaunt was the one that I think I also really enjoyed out of this collection. Some weird ones. He starts to dabble into some sci-fi in some of these. Some of these are a little more mundane on the horror. It's kind of a mixed bag of stuff, but I did really enjoy this overall. Would say 3.5 overall, because short story collections, it's really hard when you're getting a mix of stories. And then my final book is going to be The Drawing of the Three, which is the second book in the Dark Tower series. Probably my highest rating out of the 4. I gave this 4 stars. I liked this way more than the first Dark Tower book. I really think this was more of the original setup to the series versus that first book. The first book feels more like a prequel, and this feels like the first book. I enjoyed the cast of characters. We get introduced to Eddie Dean, who his story wasn't my favorite and was really kind of part of the reason, because I'm just not into all the crime stuff that was going on, which is a drastic different from what's going on with Roland in these books. We also get introduced to Odetta Holmes, who is a woman in a wheelchair, and then she has some other psychological stuff going on. And it really just felt like this was setting the cast of characters we were going to see throughout the rest of the series. Now, is that going to be fully accurate? I don't know. I have avoided everything in the Dark Tower I really can for the most part, other than just knowing like some characters that may cross over and a few things like that. But I'm really excited to get into the rest of the series. So those are the 4 Stephen King books that I've read really since there was a last big video update. I am hoping to continue this on going into 2025. I do know that Misery should be my next read, which I am super excited about because it's like one of my favorite adaptations. And I've never picked up the book, so I can't wait to see how Annie Wilkes is fully characterized in that. And then I've got some of his ones that I'm not as familiar with in the next year. I know I've got at least Dark Tower book, which is The Wastelands, isn't so far away. I will be skipping over, which was kind of included in this set, both Thinner and It, because I have read those before. It is one of my all-time favorites. It is a 5-star, but because of how drawn out this challenge already has been, I don't have the capacity for another 1,100-page book. And then Thinner is one of the Bachman books, which I believe at the time I gave like 3 stars because I read it a few years ago. But my reading has changed a lot since then, and thinking back, and a lot of the problematic stuff that happens, it'd be at least a 2.5, if not a little lower. Because I didn't mind the overall story. I didn't like the Romani representation in it, which it was a different time. And then I know we have some things like The Dark Half coming up. The Tommyknockers are coming up, even though I can normally name these in order to know the exact order I'm going in. I don't think there should be any other big skips for a while, and we're just going to kind of see. I do think I may have got a few of these out of order if they published in the first year, just based off the list that I have. We're just going to kind of keep going on whatever list I had, and if it's slightly off, that's okay, as long as we're getting the references on the crossovers. So thank you. If you have made it this far into this video, please make sure to like and subscribe down below. And then maybe let me know, what Stephen King book are you excited to see me read next? Thank you always for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.